Good morning. For those of you who may not know me, my name is George Feng. My friends call me Fenger. Senor calls me Jorge. So just go by whatever you feel most comfortable with. Recently, my dad seems to have adopted the word absurd into his lingo. Obviously, he says it in Mandarin, which is huangdan. The amount of times he says the word is just, absurd. Fortunately, he's not here today, so we can talk all about him. He also thinks he's really good at golf. Anyways, I laugh at him every day on the inside, of course. But I know deep down why the word absurd became so frequently used. Last year, which was my third year at Appleby, I went home for Christmas. After almost an entire day of traveling, I arrived at my hometown, Chengdu, and found my parents smiling and waiting at 1 a.m. in the airport. The drive home was one that we've taken many times since I've been going to school in Canada, but this time, something was different. Maybe the anxiety waiting for me to return got to my dad, or maybe he's been pondering this for a long time. Out of the silence, he finally said, "So I've been thinking about how your mom and I sent you to school in Canada. It's just absurd how you're going to school in a country halfway across the world that neither of us ever visited before our decision was made." I, being tired out of my mind from the long journey, immediately reacted, wait, what, Dad? Are you saying that you never thought this through and all of a sudden I ended up in Oakville, Ontario? My dad then said the words that I've been reflecting on every day. "We have really tried to think it through, George. But I've come to realize that thinking about it more and trying to paint a clearer picture doesn't make our decision less absurd." You may think that it's rather strange for me to describe my experience at Appleby as absurd, but the way I interpret this word is nothing like its official meaning. Let's dial back time 3 years to when I first arrived on this campus and when this absurdity began. I'm confident to say that the George back then was not quite the same as who I am today. When I first sat down on my bed in Pole Cells and looked into the mirror, I saw a hardworking student. And that's it, period. Honestly, I didn't know much about myself back then. I guess I had hobbies and talents, but in the public education system in China, they were just a way to shape myself as unique and engaged, traits that help students in a fierce competition for acceptance into middle school. I played the clarinet for years, but I never saw myself as a musician. I learned swimming at a young age, but I never thought of myself as an athlete. Growing up in China sharpened my focus on the importance of academics, and everything else was secondary. My music classes at Appleby felt different from any music classes I ever had. People were often goofing around with their instruments before class began, and Mr. Boychuk would always stare at us with this perplexed yet concerned face. Everyone had to take an art in grade 9, and some of the students were learning to play the trumpet or the saxophone for the very first time. Trust me when I say that those first rehearsals did not sound quite musical. However, Mr. Pui and Mr. B referred to everyone as musicians and practiced with us just as they would with a professional concert band. They will work with the clarinet sections individually and convey their understanding of the pieces we were working on, as if we could connect with them as musicians. For the first time, I really began to love music, more than just as a hobby that I had to take on. Later that year, Mr. Pui guided me to audition for CISMF, a music festival hosted by independent schools in the Toronto area. April of that first year at Appleby, I sat in Roy Thompson Hall and performed on the very stage that hosts the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. On that school bus back from Toronto, I came to the realization that I had discovered something new about myself. It was absurd that there was something always within me, but I just couldn't see it. Today, I proudly call myself a musician. In the winter of that first year, I decided to join the swim team. It was a decision made with reluctance and doubts, because I hadn't swum in years and I was never involved competitively anyways. Unlike the culture here in Canada, it was not popular for me to participate in sports back in my school in China. And I never expected athletics to become an important part of my life. On the first day, sitting by the pool and listening to Coach Kuiper talk about the team, I was still thinking to myself, this will just be a hobby of mine, my focus is still academics. Now you might think that I'm about to tell you that everything went smoothly and I easily found another passion. No, that was not what happened. I wasn't used to the regular exercise and high-intensity practices. I also didn't know how to dive or do a flip turn, which were critical skills to competing in the sport. The team would leave before 7 a.m. for swim meets, and I would be exhausted when we returned in late afternoon. By the end of the first month, I felt drained of energy and seriously began to question my sanity at the time I joined the team. Coming back for the winter term, one thing made me stick with the swim team. I began talking to people on the team and became friends with Josh Williams and Kieran Glover. We began to practice together every day, and gradually the practices became more than just swinging my arms in the pool. They transformed into something I looked forward to during the school day. The workouts didn't get any easier, and hard work still had to be put in. But the team began to envelop me with a sense of belonging like never before. A sense of belonging only sports teams offered. Meets became manageable when I had friends to joke around with, and relays became exciting when I channeled my energy not just in the water, but also to cheer for my teammates. Getting out of the water at CISA and having won third place in a freestyle relay for the team, a novel discovery was made. An absurd discovery that I became what I never expected myself to be. A few weeks from now, I will step onto the pool deck for my final year on the Appleby swim team. And ever since that day at CISA, I proudly call myself an athlete. People say that experiences shape who we are, but I disagree. They do not shape us, and they do not change us, but instead, they provide the venue for brand new discoveries. Over the past 3 years, I sought after new passions and found new facets of my identity, but I don't think I lost anything. Academics never faded in importance. To this day, I'm still fascinated by the stories Mr. Pulford tells about great mathematicians like Euler, Gauss, and Del Ferro. I will still stay up late trying to solve the questions Dr. Ahuja assigned, not because I had to, but because physics is everything. I still consider myself the hardworking student that I was, but I'm also more, and I'll never stop discovering more about myself. My dad often asked me to imagine how my life would be different if I stayed in China, and who it would be if I just became a student in the number 7 high school back in Chengdu. It'll be almost crazy to think that I'd be the same person I am today, and it is unlikely that I'll ever find my passion in music and athletics. But ultimately, it will be hard for me to say who I really would be if I never came to Appleby. But I know I'd be absurdly different. The same goes for my dad. He began finding it absurd that he sent me to school in Canada because it was difficult for him to picture my experience. He was never here to live my new life day by day with me, so it will be hard for him to gauge who I really became. When I went home for the first summer, it would have been absurd for him to discover that his son suddenly turned into a musician and an athlete. To all the international students here today, maybe you have already noticed this. There exists a disconnect, whether cultural or not, between our lives here at Appleby and our lives before. It is difficult for our parents to understand our experiences here in Canada. However, this disconnect, this absurdity, is exactly what has driven my growth. The activities I took part in at Appleby were so far out of the comfort zones for both my dad and myself that they set the stage for me to discover fundamentally new identities that were dormant within me. Canada was such a different lens for me to see through that I found aspects of my identity that were previously unknown, and I could finally see who I truly am. This year's theme for the prefect is keep it real. And to me, it doesn't mean to hold firmly onto who I am right now and never change. The past 3 years taught me that those unlikely experiences and absurd journeys are what truly allow for self-discovery. This year, and all the years of my life to come, I will keep it real. And I encourage you to do the same. By constantly seeking untried paths, always exploring new places, and never leaving ourselves in the comfort of a routine. Appleby was my first arena for self-discovery, and it could also be yours, 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 and all of yours. In this new school year, I challenge you all to go out and seek the things you've never done, things that are absurdly out of your comfort zone. Because behind the curtains of that absurdity lies the real you, waiting to be discovered. Please rise and sing hymn 430. Thank you.